Hey, good morning. It's Wednesday, June 2nd. Again, thanks for being here today. Back from my nice visit with good friends in North Carolina last night. I'm going to continue looking at this portion of Ephesians 4 and about futile thinking and not thinking like the way the Gentiles do. And all that simply means is by Gentiles is people who are not thinking in relationship to God and how he runs the world. So the psalmists talk about this, that the fool has said in his heart, there is no God. So someone who is Gentile thinking, foolish thinking, is simply someone who refuses to acknowledge the reality and wonder of God and our need to be accountable to him and to reach out to him. Doesn't mean the person is not intelligent or smart or can't do many great things. Right off to mind, people like Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos come to the fore. They're certainly not stupid men. They're very wise people and have accomplished a lot. But neither are they connected to God. So all their efforts are going to wind up being futile. And that's what Ephesians is telling us here, what Paul's telling us here in Ephesians. So when we get to verse 17, there's some strong language here. Paul says, "So I tell you this and insist on it in the Lord, that you must no longer live as the Gentiles do in the futility of their thinking." Some of your translations will say walk, and that's actually what the Greek says there is walk. But the meaning is when you walk along the road of life, when you live along the road of life, don't think the way the people that don't recognize and love God think. Sometimes we make the mistake of hearing these strong language that Paul uses, "So I tell you and insist on it in the Lord." Rather, what's being talked about here is a plea for them not to fall into futility and the trap of futility. A guide to futility is simply not acknowledging that we have to trust God. If you look at the first 3 chapters of Ephesians, this is not a war story of what we would call a fighting story. This is a story about love. And he ends it in chapter 3 by saying this: "I pray that you, being rooted and established in love, may have the power, together with all the saints, to grasp how wide and long and high and deep is the love of Christ." That's the motivating factor here. If I can't perceive the love of Christ and his relationship to the world, my thinking will be futile, frustrating. So now when I come over to just a few lines later in chapter 4, "So I tell you this and insist on it in the Lord, that you must no longer live as the Gentiles do in the futility of their thinking." Peter O'Brien's commentary, it's a hefty commentary, but notice what he says here about the way the futility is in chapter 4, with what we just read. "Because it lacks a true relationship with God," that is this Gentile mind that's not honoring God, "because it lacks a true relationship with God, Gentile thinking suffers from the consequences of having lost touch with reality and is left fumbling with inane trivialities and worthless side issues." That is futility. Because it lacks a true relationship with God, Gentile thinking suffers from the consequences of having lost touch with reality and is left fumbling with things that are trivialities. That's the definition of futility. That's what Paul is urging us to. That's why he's so concerned. It's not about, "Oh, don't do this, I insist on it," but please, I insist on it in God, in the mercy of Christ, because of the love of God. Don't think like that way, which is going to lead you into all kinds of futility and frustration. And indeed, as we mentioned last night, where does that type of thinking lead us? We don't know how the world got here, but we're guessing. We think it's some sort of a cosmic experience. We think we can change our gender just by thinking about it. We think we can ignore what's happened in history. We think that we can write our own rules of morality. And compassionately, I could ask, how's that working out for us? That's what Paul is pleading with us to do. I insist on it in the Lord. Don't think that way. Because all it leads is to futility and frustration. And that's the thought for this morning. And we're going to pick up on this as we go through these verses from 17 to 20 in chapter 4 of Ephesians. This isn't some harsh thing. This is a gentle, strong plea. Live in light of the beauty of Christ. And that's the thought for this day. Again, thanks so much for being here. And Lord willing, we'll see you tonight. You have a great day. Bye-bye.